958 suspected cases, 223 deaths, and now the IRC is calling this potentially the deadliest Ebola outbreak on record. But that claim needs a hard look before we let it settle in.
I'm Daniel. Cassidy's here, and we actually have 3 things that matter today. Atlanta is screening passengers, Goma has a case, and there may finally be a strain-matched vaccine, with a very big asterisk.
This is Ebola Watch, and the week has clearly shifted from response being assembled to response is visibly behind the outbreak. We can say that out loud now because the numbers have earned it. This one's from ACIPC.
To date, over 900 suspected cases and 220 suspected deaths have been recorded in the DRC, with 101 confirmed cases and 10 confirmed deaths. Uganda has reported 5 confirmed cases and 1 death.
The WHO Director General's May 25th briefing gives us the cleanest, consolidated picture so far. 101 confirmed cases in DRC, 10 confirmed deaths, and then 900-plus suspected cases sitting behind that, plus 220 suspected deaths. Uganda now has 5 confirmed cases and 1 confirmed death. That's the marker that's been tightening all week, and today Tedros put it on the record.
So when the IRC says potentially the deadliest on record, they're leaning almost entirely on the suspected column, because 10 confirmed deaths in DRC is not deadliest on record territory. That claim only works if those 220 suspected deaths get confirmed.
Exactly. I'm not brushing off the IRC's framing. 220 suspected deaths is a real and rising toll. But deadliest on record is a certification, and that needs confirmed numbers. Tedros called the situation sobering, which is a different bar entirely.
And Tedros spelled out why the confirmed count is lagging: delayed detection, active conflict, mass displacement, community distrust. That's not a lab backlog problem. It's a structural ceiling on what can be certified, which means the suspected column may be closer to the outbreak's true size, even if it can't be the official one.
Here's European Center for Disease Prevention and Control, ECDC.
1 American citizen has been exposed to the virus in a healthcare setting in DRC. According to the U.S.'s Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, this person and 6 high-risk contacts are being medically evacuated to a special isolation ward in Germany. In addition, Uganda has reported 2 imported cases in people who had traveled from DRC.
The ECDC's May 19 snapshot is already 8 days old, but one number in it still matters today. 1 confirmed case in Goma, North Kivu. Goma is a city of over 1 million people on the Rwanda border, and that is not just a provincial code. It's the busiest humanitarian logistics hub in eastern DRC, so a case there is a very different data point than a cluster in Ituri.
And the ECDC was already saying on the 19th that the outbreak is likely larger than currently described, which aged badly, fast, because we're now at 958 suspected and 223 deaths. Also, they make the vaccine point plainly. No licensed vaccines, no specific treatments for Bundibugyo. So to the question we've been circling, is there a shot you could get? No. The Kenya-linked candidate is a maybe in trial, not a dose.
Right, and I want to stay very precise about what the IRC's deadliest on record framing is resting on. 223 deaths is the total across suspected and confirmed. But the confirmed death toll is only a slice of that. The claim may end up being right, but certifying on record, while confirmed cases were still only around 30 as of May 19th, is a lot to ask from unverified numbers. That doesn't make the toll less real. It makes the comparison harder to defend.
Atlanta joined Dulles in screening as of the CDC's May 18th order, and Hartsfield is the busiest connecting hub in the country, so this is not a footnote. But the trigger is country of presence, not exposure zone. DRC, Uganda, South Sudan, in the prior 21 days. So the same floor question from Dulles now applies at scale. Does the questionnaire actually catch a layover through Kampala versus time in Ituri?
From SI News and Analysis.
Helen Branswell's reporting makes clear that the confirmed to suspected case ratio in this outbreak sits near 10%, not the 50% seen in the 2018 to 2020 Eastern DRC epidemic, because local labs were built to identify Ebola Zaire, not whatever strain is circulating now.
The IRC is calling this potentially the deadliest Ebola outbreak on record. And I want to handle that honestly. 223 deaths is a real and rising toll. But on record is doing a lot of work when confirmed deaths are only a fraction of that 223. And the confirmed to suspected ratio is sitting near 10% precisely because local labs were built to diagnose Ebola Zaire. Not whatever strain is circulating now. The headline number and the certified number are not the same number.
Okay, but Atlanta. Hartsfield-Jackson, the busiest connecting hub in the country, is now in the screening regime, and the trigger isn't confirmed case geography, it's country of presence, DRC, Uganda, or South Sudan, in the last 21 days. That reaches a lot of itineraries that have nothing to do with Ituri province.
Which takes us right back to the Dulles question we raised on May 22nd. Can the questionnaire and temperature setup actually tell the difference between somebody who just transited Kampala and somebody who was doing contact work in Butembo? Adding Atlanta doesn't solve that. It just stretches the same protocol to a second major hub.
And the vaccine question finally has a name attached to it. There's a Kenya-linked Bundibugyo-specific candidate being floated for trials in Uganda, which is the clearest answer we've had all week to, is there a shot that works against this strain? The answer is still no, with a maybe in trial asterisk, and experts are explicit that Bundibugyo coverage is not guaranteed even with this candidate.
This one's from the IRC.
A new IRC Watchlist Flash Alert identifies 3 warning signs that this outbreak could be particularly difficult to contain. The outbreak is spreading faster than the response. Conflict and displacement are accelerating the risk of regional spread. And severe global aid cuts have weakened frontline health systems and outbreak preparedness across Eastern DRC.
The IRC is now on the record calling this potentially the deadliest Ebola outbreak ever. And I want to be careful about what that claim can carry right now. Of the 223 deaths reported across DRC and Uganda, confirmed deaths are only a fraction of that figure. So deadliest on record is a projection built partly on suspected cases, not a certified count.
I hear you on the math, but the IRC isn't a tabloid. That's an institutional source using that framing publicly for the first time this outbreak. And that changes the register for me. The 2018-2020 outbreak killed over 2,000 people, and the IRC is saying the conditions now are worse because the health system in Eastern DRC is weaker today than it was then, after the aid cuts.
That structural point is real, and it's worth sitting with. A degraded baseline means the same outbreak footprint does more damage. But the confirmed versus suspected distinction isn't pedantry here. It's the variable that decides whether deadliest on record holds up once labs catch up. And right now, the suspected cases are still running well ahead of what's been confirmed.
And the DRC health minister already said on the record that lab capacity is limited and insecurity is disrupting operations. So the gap between suspected and confirmed isn't a measurement artifact, it's a direct result of the same crisis the IRC is flagging. Those two threads are pointing at the same failure.
John Muchangi, writing in The Star.
Considering the extremely limited available evidence on cross-protection against non-Zaire species, any decision to use this vaccine in the current outbreak will require further assessments and will occur in accordance with WHO guidance, Gavi said, adding that deployment would require informed consent from affected communities.
The Kenya-linked vaccine story is the biggest countermeasures development this week. But let's be exact about what it is. Experts are considering whether to trial a candidate in Uganda. That's a very long way from a licensed, distributed, strain-specific dose. And the core issue hasn't changed. Bundibugyo is not Zaire Ebola virus, and Ervebo, the one vaccine we actually have stockpiles of, was built for Zaire. Protection against this strain is still unconfirmed.
So if somebody asked me right now, is there a vaccine that would protect against what's spreading in Uganda? The answer is still no, with a maybe being studied asterisk. That's the cleanest direct answer we've had all week, and it's not a reassuring one.
Which is exactly the sequencing problem. Yesterday's emergency scientific consultation ended with immediate research priorities still being identified. Today, we have a named candidate being floated for trials. That's movement. But a trial being considered in Uganda is not a stockpile in Butembo. The equity logistics gap is still wide open. If Ebola Watch helps you track fast-moving risks, try Iran War Daily, a daily foreign affairs briefing on the U.S.-Israel-Iran war, from strikes and ceasefire talks to oil markets and regional spillover. Find it wherever you listen to podcasts. We've put links to all of today's stories in the show notes, so if something caught your ear, you can take a closer look there. That's Ebola Watch for today. This is a Lantern podcast.